Man Up, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. And now, it's time to Man Up.
Welcome to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network. I am Joe Stopulus, and today I am joined by Dr. Chuck Chalberg to discuss G.K. Chesterton. Let us start in prayer in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. St. Michael, the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Chuck Chalberg is a G.K. Chesterton impersonator, I guess you could say. He will be coming next month in November to St. Thomas Classical Academy to do a one-man show on G.K. Chesterton. Really excited about that, and obviously I'm excited to have him on the show today to discuss G.K. Chesterton. I think there's so much we can learn about him, his life, his thinking. He's a giant of a man in many ways, size, but also in scope and in mind. And, you know, I think that the more we dive into and get to know these great Catholic figures, these great thinkers, the more we can emulate them in our lives. And so, obviously, with this opportunity, one of the cool things that our school does at St. Thomas is every year we try to put on at least 2 community building events. And so, I had one of them. If you remember, I had him on the show, but I also broadcasted on the podcast the actual talk itself, and that was the one from St. Martin's Academy. So we had that. We've had other various talks on literature and on politics and religion and such. And so it's just these great community building events that we have at St. Thomas. And so we have another one next month, and that's going to be on November 12th. I'll talk more about it with Dr. Chuck. But again, it's a really cool event. I love that our school is doing this, that we're doing this. We're trying to build community around culture. And so Dr. Chuck is going to be down here next month to do a one-night evening, a one-man show with G.K. Chesterton. So stick around. We'll do a short break, and we'll have Dr. Chuck on the other side.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Mercy College of Health Sciences, where you can chart your course for more.
Mercy College provides unparalleled clinical rotations, hands-on learning, accelerated education, and flexible schedules. Since 1899, Mercy College has been transforming students into healthcare professionals. Guided by Catholic values, our faculty put classroom theory into practice. Students are prepared for roles in service and leadership throughout their own careers.
Learn more at mchs.edu. Mercy College of Health Sciences, mchs.edu.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by Five Sons Naturescapes. Five Sons Naturescapes is a Catholic veteran-owned family company providing premium outdoor landscaping. Learn more about Five Sons Naturescapes at fivesonsnaturescapes.com. fivesonsnaturescapes.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio is provided by CTO. Your support has helped thousands of students attend our Catholic schools. CTOiowa.org. At CTO, the bottom line, it's for the kids and their future.
My help comes from you. You're right here.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. Excited today to be joined by Chuck Chalberg. He is a retired academic, having taught American history for many years, and now today he is he's an actor. He's an actor, and he's coming to Des Moines next month for a great evening at my school at St. Thomas Classical Academy in Des Moines to do an evening with G.K. Chesterton. Chuck, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. I just learned a new word, actoring. I didn't know there was.
Yeah, I made it up. I made it up. Listen, when you're the host of the show, you have full jurisdiction to do whatever you like, and I'm going to use that word from now on. So,
I think I will too.
Appreciate that out of you. Well, hey, so here's the thing, Chuck. You are coming to Des Moines, and we are obviously really excited to have you at the school. I'm going to pitch the event real quick. I'll do it now so people can have it written down, and then I'll talk about it at the end. But the actual night is on Saturday, November 12th at 7 p.m. It's at St. Thomas Classical Academy, which is at 4801 Franklin, so Franklin Junior High School. And the name of the event is an Evening with G.K. Chesterton, where you perform a one-man show using Chesterton's own words on his conversion to Catholicism. So I personally am really excited about it. But when I heard about this, I said, well, I'm going to need to know more about you and your relationship with Chesterton, because there's so much we can learn from him. I've had Dale Ahlquist on this show before. I've talked about Chesterton, but I think each person's relationship with him It's different, and we can all learn from it. So, Chuck, curious on how you first even came to get to know G.K. Chesterton.
Well, it's been a humbling experience for me in a number of ways. I did not come to him as a teenager or as a college student. I went to the junior college up in central Minnesota, since my father was the dean, as they were then called, of the operation. And I thought I better go there. Then I went to a Jesuit school out in Colorado, Regis, long enough ago that it was a real Jesuit college, as opposed to what they say now, in the Jesuit tradition, whatever that means.
Yes.
But I majored in history. Of course, in a small school, I knew a lot of English majors, and nobody that I can recall talked about Chesterton. He really fell out of favor or out of people's minds, I think, after the Second World War, and has only been revived in the last 20, 30 years. And I'm a reader, and if you read enough, you see him quoted, you find him quoted. And finally, sometime, I would guess in the mid 80s, I thought, well, I've got to, of course I'd heard of him, but I've really got to read him. And so I started reading him in my, late 30s. And I got hooked, and I was already doing some of these one-man shows. It all started out, they stuck me in the theater at our community college to teach the American History Survey. It kind of doubled as a classroom. And I looked around and I thought, I knew there were people who did this. And my dad did summer stock theater up in the Lakes area outside of Brainerd. And I have nice memories of going out to watching him. And I tried out for plays when I was in high school and college, and I never got picked for much of anything. And I thought, well, nobody can tell me I can't do this. So I started, the first one I did was a fellow by the name of Edmund Ruffin, whom I doubt people wouldn't know much. He was a fire-eating secessionist, and I'd been reading his diary. And so I rented a Confederate uniform, and he had a long flowing white hair, and I got a wig and came in and did Edmund Ruffin. And I've done him at a few Civil War roundtables, but that's it. And anyway, I was doing, then I started doing Teddy Roosevelt and Chesterton's polar opposite in many respects, H.L. Mencken, who's a wonderful writer, but they disagreed on about everything. And I then decided Chesterton really is somebody worth keeping around. And I was on a Fulbright in Hungary in 1992, and we were there for a calendar year, and the summer project was to put my shoebox full of Chesterton notes into a script. And we were visited that summer by I had an aunt who was a Benedictine nun in Duluth, at St. Scholastica. And another nun whom I had known for years had come to Hungary on something else and came to visit us. And I told her what I was doing. And she said, well, there's this Midwest Chesterton Society in Milwaukee. They might be interested. So fast forward a couple of years, by the time I had the show done and memorized, I got a hold of the fellow running it, and he said, well, sure, we don't have any money, but, come and do it. and I thought, well, at the time, I just wanted a place to do it. So I drove over. And if I had known how much these people knew about Chesterton, I would not have had the nerve to go perform it in front of them. I got to the point fairly early in the show where I would start a line and I would hear people in the audience finish the line. And so it became kind of a running gag through the very first show. I would get to a line and I would stop and wait for somebody to finish it. I've been back there a couple of times was back there. They now moved. Dale Alquist took the whole thing over and is moving it around the country. Last summer, they went back to Milwaukee for the first time. And I was asked to introduce a fellow by the name of John Walker, who now also does Chesterton. And he's a theater teacher at the Franciscan University in Steubenville, and a very good guy. And he looks Chesterton. I'm the part. I'm half Chesterton's size, but he's not. So I kind of passed the torch to him and apologized to the audience, saying you've been dealing with this fake Chesterton for all these years, and here's the real guy. But it's back to where I began with all this, doing it at parishes around the country and meeting young people who are reading him when they're 17 has been quite humbling, because I was not one of those people.
Well, I do think there's obviously a revival with both him and C.S. Lewis. I think that you're seeing this. It's something where you can clearly see that for the next multiple generations, they will continue to grow in popularity. I mentioned when I had Dale on the show, having Bishop Barron put Chesterton as one of his pivotal players in that series, that only just solidifies here's one of the prominent thinkers in the Catholic world. To have a guy like him put Chesterton up on such a pedestal, again, to me, just shows that there's so much depth to this man and it's worth our time to consider him.
Yep. And now Bishop Barron is a Minnesotan.
Yeah, that's right. Now he's up with you guys too. That's right. Have you had the opportunity to talk with him yet?
No, I have not.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm sure, because I know when I talked with Dale, I know that he said that that he worked a lot with Dale and the Chesterton Society during that episode to make sure they were getting into being correct. They wanted to make sure they're dotting I's, crossing T's, things like that. Mm-hmm. So for your give me when you first read him, were you just hooked right away? And how did you get into it? What I want to get into him, but it's difficult. He's not an easy read. So how did you get into him, and how did you grow along with Chesterton?
You're absolutely right. He's not an easy read. And whenever I have done a show and am fielding questions as myself, afterwards, I try to caution people, you've got to sit with him a little while. Lewis is a wonderful writer. Chesterton could have used an editor. And he notoriously would dictate one essay to his secretary, Dorothy Collins, while at the same time he was writing a different essay. I mean, I don't know how he could have done it. He was a profound thinker. And of course, he has some wonderful lines and insightful lines. But sometimes I think his favorite word was anyhow, anyhow, and then we go on to something else. But you really do have to sit with him. But it's the first book I read was What's Wrong with the World. It was more the title that got me than anything else. And of course, his own response to that it was I am, which he said ought to be everybody's response in this fallen world, but of course he went on to more than that. He was an opponent of bigness, whether it be big government or big business or you name it. It was he called himself a distributist. I know Dale is trying to change that name to localism, which is more understandable. What is a distributist? And it really was the idea of making sure, doing what you can to make sure property is as widely distributed as possible and operating. He was quite impressed by Pope Leo XIII and the Catholic idea of subsidiarity, that things that should be done on the local level and could be done on the local level, that's where you begin. You should be very reluctant to turn to powers greater than that, especially. He didn't think of himself as a socialist, and he didn't think of himself as a capitalist. Mm-hmm. Either one. He thought, of course, trade and commerce is a good thing, but always within limits.
As I look at what we can learn from G.K. Chesterton as men, and it's funny because I do want to pick your brain on Roosevelt a little bit, because I love Roosevelt as well, and I think I love both of them for the same reason. And it's they're definitely, there's a lot of overlap between their personalities. Both of them had very large personalities. Both of them had this love of the fight. They both just loved getting, the man in the arena. They loved being in the arena and wrestling with things of consequence. So when I look at Chesterton, and this has been an evolution in my own life, I've noticed in the last decade or so, maybe, I don't know, something like that, but caring way more about things that are important, the line of sport, or what is it, religion and politics, what else is there to talk about, right? So these are the things that you have to actually wrestle with, because they're the things that have important ramifications for our life and our afterlife, whereas things like sports and TV don't. Those are mostly fairly fleeting. And so he wrestled with big ideas, and he expanded his energy on these things that had consequences for our lives today and our consequences for our lives eternally. And so I think when I look at Chesterton, and we've been to Roosevelt as well too, but like there's some level of they had this fortitude and this courage to take on the big ideas, and they did it in a loving way too. But I think there's some level of a call to action from both of those guys. And I'm curious in your own thoughts, and when you look at Chesterton and what we can learn from him and how we can emulate him in some way, what are those ideas, what are those things that you get from Chesterton?
Well, the first thing is, yes, life is a battle. Battle with yourself, battle with your own weaknesses and failings, and a battle over ideas of how things ought to go. I mean, life was not a lark. Life was a fight. And I think that he and Roosevelt were very much on the same page on that one. And in fact, Roosevelt, one of the people, after he left the presidency, he went on a tour of Europe. And when he got to London, he made it clear that one of the people he wanted to meet was Chesterton, and they did meet. I don't know much about what went on during that meeting, but they did meet. Now, at the same time, I just sent a piece to the editor of Crisis magazine, the online version of Crisis magazine. Chesterton wrote a book the same year that he converted to Catholicism. It was published at least in 1922, called Eugenics and Other Evils. A very interesting title. And eugenics was quite the rage. And Teddy Roosevelt was caught up in it. It didn't become his be all and end all, but he thought there was some good things about eugenics, and didn't see any of the evils of eugenics. And of course, this was pre-Hitler and all of that, but Chesterton was onto this right from the get-go. He called it a fad. And fads, he said, can become fashionable. And then they can become dangerous. And then they can become tyrannous. And actually, the piece that I sent was to dealing with our current fad, which is transgenderism. Clearly, it's a fad. And you add social media, the power of social media to the fad, and clearly it's become a fashionable fad, but it's also got the potential to become a very dangerous and even tyrannous thing. You see proposals. Just the other day, I was seeing something about a legislator in Virginia wanting to punish parents who try to interfere with children doing this, having their bodies mutilated without the parents knowing about it or being consulted about it, and facing potential jail over interfering with this. This is unbelievable. Anyway, I'm off on a bit of a tangent here, but it was one area where certainly Chesterton and Teddy Roosevelt disagreed. Roosevelt was, of course, a great American patriot, and Chesterton thought there was absolutely nothing wrong with that. He was not an imperialist, and he didn't really think Roosevelt was an imperialist either. The great line about England is an empire in which the sun never sets, and Roosevelt said, "I have no time for empires without sunsets." And Rudyard Kipling, of course, very much admired by Roosevelt, but Chesterton, wasn't too entirely pleased with Kipling. He said Kipling admired England. He didn't really love England. And that was a nice distinction that I think he made between the two. Well,
if you're making a recommendation, again, as we've already warn the listeners that it's not an easy thing to get into. Is there a recommendation that you have from whether it's a resource or a book or one of his own writings or writing on Chesterton that you would recommend? This is the first step I would do to get into Chesterton.
Well, if you're going to reach Chesterton directly, the easiest way to begin is the Father Brown Mysteries. Yeah. My kids have done that. I really think orthodoxy is probably the best way to start with Chesterton. It's profound, but and now I think Dale has come up with a new, I don't know if it's published yet, kind of an American translation of orthodoxy. And of course, any of Dale's books are a great introduction to it. I'm doing a class right now for an operation down in Texas called Homeschool Connections. It's an online Catholic homeschool operation, and I'm doing a course as Chesterton. I'm teaching it as Chesterton. And in fact, we've got a class this afternoon, and I'm using Dale's book, The Complete Thinker. But his Apostle of Common Sense and Common Sense 101 are also good places to start. As far as his social philosophy is concerned, What's Wrong with the World is a very good book to read. It's not a book of theology, but it's a book of his commentary on the English public school system and on as he called them, Hudge and Gudge. Hudge is the socialist and Gudge is the capitalist. And as far as he was concerned, the truth of the matter is they're in league with each other. And boy, oh boy, do we see examples of that today with big tech and big pharma, and the bigger you grow, the bureaucracy, and I keep wondering, back to Teddy Roosevelt for just a second, what he would think. I mean, he was the original progressive. He was the one who started all this, but of course, in his mind, it was not to blunt. It was to blunt socialism, not to pave the way for it. Yeah, he thought that capitalism needed some honing and some toning down, but he had no idea that I don't think of what this would grow into. The same goes with the environmental movement. Roosevelt believed in use. He believed in development. To see people trotting him out with tearful eyes, saying, "Look what in fact your own party has abandoned you." Well, no, the environmentalists, seems to me, at least the extreme environmentalists, have abandoned Roosevelt and what he was really trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Well, Chuck, I got to say, on orthodoxy, again, as we kind of talked about, I would come at this like a glass of fine wine that you're going to chew on. You're going to read the same paragraph a couple times. You're not going to speed through it. It's not C.S. Lewis. It's definitely something you're going to wrestle with. And you're going to read it slowly, and you're going to contemplate it while you try to wrestle with the ideas he's got. So again, you have to come at it from a different mindset. At least for me, again, I'm a big dummy, and that's how I have to come at it when I've read anything, but specifically orthodoxy. I think a plug I would make, again, just for this event coming up, again, it's on Saturday, November 12th at 7 p.m. Franklin Junior High School, which is the building, but it's St. Thomas Classical Academy. And Chuck is going to be there, and an evening with G.K. Chesterton. So again, I think Chuck, that's probably as good a way as anyone to get involved with the exploring, being introduced to the person of G.K. Chesterton. So thanks so much for joining me today, and I'm excited to meet you next month, brother.
One quick one. This one is going to be a talk. This is the 100th anniversary of his conversion to Catholicism, and so it's less a show than it is a talk on conversion and on his own conversion. Of course, there will be a lot of asides and a lot of I hope good Chestertonian one-liners. But he's there to give a talk as opposed to quote, perform, unquote.
Well, we look forward to your acting in a big way. So,
Okay.
well, stick around. We're headed to short break. We'll be right back.
Dad, it's been a great summer.
It has, Zoe. Steve Havman, Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul here. We've been busy all summer helping our 6th Avenue, Army Post, and Windsor Heights locations collect a bunch of great donations this summer.
How do all the donations help, Dad?
The more donations we collect, Zoe, the more local residents we can help. Simply Google St. Vincent de Paul of Des Moines to learn how your donations help us help many local residents. We appreciate your continued support.
St. Vincent de Paul of Des Moines. Donate, volunteer, shop.
Good job, Zoe.
Thanks, Dad.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio provided by the Sarah Vocations Ministry, including the St. Sarah Club of Des Moines and the Sarah Club of Council Bluffs. Sarah is an apostolate of the Worldwide Catholic Church dedicated to fostering and supporting priesthood and religious vocations. Sarahans strive to accomplish their mission through prayer, fellowship, and service to the bishop, priests, sisters, and all in religious formation, and in doing so to increase their own holiness. Learn more at joinsarah.org, joinserra.org. Thank you, Sarahans, for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio.
My help comes from you. You're right here.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. My thanks again to Dr. Chuck Chalberg. Really excited for this night, Saturday, November 12th at 7 p.m. Again, these are great events. Everyone we've had has been just rock solid, and I've heard really good things about Dr. Chuck. And this idea of growing in culture, right? So we're doing community events around great thinkers, around great literature, around the arts, whatever these things are. This is just another great offering from St. Thomas, and I love that they're doing this. And Dr. Chuck, obviously being a historian, being a person who puts on one-man shows of G.K. Chesterton, it's a tremendous opportunity for us here in Des Moines to get to know Chesterton on a different level. And it's a way for us to have an insight into the man of G.K. Chesterton. As I said kind of in the opening segment, the more we get to know these great thinkers and how they acted, how they thought, their beliefs, the more we can emulate them in our lives. And Chesterton is one of these guys, similar to a John Henry Newman, obviously a C.S. Lewis, these guys who I think the seed has been planted and will continue to grow for generations and generations and centuries, where we're just going to continue to unpack the knowledge that they had. And as Dr. Chuck, at the end of that last segment, you kind of heard, the things he was saying in the early 1900s have tremendous value even today as we're talking about things like transgenderism and all these other things that, obviously didn't even exist in his time, but the principles that he taught and the way that he verbalized the positions, the Catholic positions, they're timeless truths, and G.K. Chesterton's just one of these giants of the faith. So November 12th at 7 p.m., would love to have you join us at St. Thomas Classical Academy along with Dr. Chuck Chalberg. Thanks for joining me today on Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulus. It's time to Man Up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness.